It was meant to be the ideal summer getaway. At Camping Los Alfaques, a tranquil beachside refuge close to Tarragona, Spain, families smiled while the sun bathed the Spanish coast in gold and the waves softly crashed onto the sand. Then, all of it changed in a flash. A loud explosion, fires higher than structures, and a heat that was so great that it left behind nothing but ashes. In what is now regarded as one of the most horrifying tragedies in Spanish history, more than 200 people died. Even though the fire has long since been extinguished, it is believed that the spirits of the deceased still exist. Visitors still report seeing spectral beings strolling the scene, hearing whispers on the wind, and seeing mysterious lights floating down the highway, as if they were repeatedly reliving the night they died. This is the tale of Spain's haunted campsite, Los Alfaques. The Camping Los Alfaques was bustling on July 11, 1978. Families have come to enjoy the stunning Mediterranean coast from all around Europe. Couples unwinded in their caravans, kids played by the water, while friends sat down to eat beneath the palm trees. However, they were unaware that death was already imminent. A vehicle carrying 25 tons of flammable liquefied propylene drove down the N340 highway right outside Tarragona, not far from the campsite. The tanker was overloaded, its cargo was unstable, and the summer sun was steadily turning it into a ticking time bomb, but the driver was unaware of this. Then, around 2:35 p.m., as the truck was approaching the campsite's entrance, a loud, abrupt boom sound effect followed by quiet. The earth trembled with a huge explosion. A moment later, the whole campsite was on fire. The radius of the explosion, estimated at between 0.5 and 1 kilometer, instantly killed 158 people. Witnesses reported that everything and everyone in the vicinity was destroyed when a wave of flames went over. Some people died immediately. Others ran away, their bodies consumed by the flames in a last-ditch effort to get to the water. But there was no escape. Vehicles melted, corpses converted to ash, and the roaring flames muffled the victims' cries. The temperature reached 2,000 degrees Celsius, and survivors assured that the seawater boiled due to the intense heat. By the time the fire was extinguished, over 200 people were dead, and there was no longer any Camping Los Alfaques. In total, 243 people died, and more than 300 were seriously injured. The first ghost stories appeared quickly after. When passing the remains at night, locals reported hearing voices, children's laughter, the murmur of conversations, etc., as though there was still life at the campsite. However, drivers on the N340, the exact route where the tragedy happened, had the most horrifying experiences. Truck drivers reported seeing people standing at the side of the road, wearing vintage summer attire and looking at them with vacant eyes. Some even asserted that these individuals would cross the road and cause them to aggressively swerve, just to turn around and discover that there was nobody. Miguel Ramos, one of the drivers, noticed a woman standing by the road late one evening. She wore a white summer dress, had scorched skin, and was barefoot. He slowed down because he thought she needed aid, but his blood turned cold when his headlights lit up her face. Her mouth twisted in a mute scream and her eyes were empty sockets. Then, she disappeared. Miguel continued to drive till he was several miles distant. He found he wasn't alone after sharing his story. She had been spotted by other travelers. She showed up in their rear-view mirrors, according to some. From the rear seat, others claimed to have heard her whispering. However, the most horrifying experiences took place at the actual campsite. Some parts of Los Alfaques have not been altered, despite the fact that the majority has been restored. EVP recordings of paranormal investigators have captured voices that weren't there. Inexplicable figures have been captured using thermal cameras. Additionally, some campers who were courageous enough to spend the night have told of waking up to the sound of kids playing outside their tents, only to go outside and discover nothing. Some people think they're only tales that have been heightened by fear and time. However, if you ever find yourself traveling late at night on the N340 and you spot a woman wearing white standing by the side of the road, whatever you do, keep going. the 25th of April, 1986. The night was still in the town of Pripyat. Almost 50,000 people lived in this peaceful industrial community in Soviet Ukraine. The town's sole purpose was to accommodate the employees of the Soviet engineering marvel known as the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The majority of its residents were asleep, not realizing that life as they knew it would be destroyed in a matter of hours. Engineers and technicians were conducting a standard safety test inside Reactor 4. The process was supposed to be safe. However, the core of Reactor 4 became unstable due to a disastrous series of mistakes, carelessness, and mechanical failure. A tremendous explosion tore through the plant at precisely 1:23 a.m. The earth trembled. The air exploded with a shockwave of radiation and fire. What transpired was an unimaginable nightmare. The explosion roused people who hurried to their balconies to observe the plant's unsettling blue glow. Some people were captivated by what appeared to be an unearthly light piercing the night sky as they stood in the streets. They were unaware that the air itself was now contaminated. Firefighters, ambulances, and plant staff were among the first responders called in. None of them realized how big the catastrophe really was. They breathed in the invisible death that now pervaded the air as they stepped directly into the conflagration. The following events were widely reported. Days later, Pripyat was deserted, its streets quiet. Only the distant hum of Geiger counters alerting people to potentially fatal radiation levels could be heard. The town was dead. But some say something remained. It started with the employees, those who had made it through the first explosion. Some plant engineers reported seeing a shadowy figure standing inside the remains of Reactor 4 in the days following the explosion. They characterized it as a tall, dark figure that was somewhat human, but not quite. A technician who was dispatched to evaluate the damage had a terrifying experience. Something stirred in the shadows as he made his way through the twisted remnants of Reactor 4. His torch shook in his hands as he froze. In the dim light, he could just make out a figure standing in front of him. It was featureless, not a face. A humanoid, solid black bulk, yet incorrect. The technician's legs refused to move as he attempted to flee. It was a deep primordial fear that paralyzed him, not radiation or fatigue. Then suddenly it was gone. The man ran away, shaken. However, he was instructed to keep silent after reporting his sighting to a supervisor. Ghost stories were hardly the most important issue facing the Soviet administration. However, the sightings persisted. A cleanup team was positioned close to the power plant for weeks following Pripyat's evacuation. Assessing radiation levels, recording damage, and recovering what could be recovered was their straightforward task. The squad was assembled at their base one evening when a phone rang. The issue was that Pripyat had no operational phone lines. One of the men reluctantly took up the receiver. Initially, there was just static. Then a faint voice could be heard over the crackle of white noise. It was far away, broken. "Help us! The fire! It's burning! We can't get out!" was said in a whisper in Russian. The man's blood became icy. It sounded like a firefighter's voice. The same firefighters who had perished the night of the explosion, their bodies destroyed by radiation. He shut off the phone abruptly. His crew dismissed it with a laugh, attributing it to fatigue and stress. However, as the evening wore on, the phone rang again, and again, and again, until the staff, one by one, declined to respond. When an investigator attempted to follow up on the calls the next day, they ultimately led to a Pripyat fire station that had been abandoned. A fire station where all of the firefighters who were on duty that night had died. Years went by. Chernobyl was closed to the public and made a banned zone. The radiation levels were still lethal. Then the rumors started. Journalists, scientists, and even illegal explorers reported weird experiences when they delved into the remains. In the fog, a silhouette. The sound of footsteps filling deserted streets. The sound of unidentified names being whispered by distant speakers. While keeping an eye on the wildlife around the facility, one team of researchers noticed something unsettling on their apparatus. There was nothing there, but a Geiger counter that measured radiation spiked violently. Then they noticed it on their infrared camera, a distant humanoid heat signature, even though there was no one around. A twisted, rather human-looking form, observing. Then it vanished. The same emotion, not just terror but a profound sense of sadness, is described by everyone who has witnessed the paranormal side of Chernobyl, as though the location itself is in mourning. Do the victims' ghosts still haunt the location where they suffered? A cautionary tale for those who venture inside? Or is there another possibility? Something created by the radiation itself, a presence incomprehensible to man. It should never have happened what happened at Chernobyl. However, something is still there, and maybe, just maybe, it doesn't want to be forgotten. Thanks for watching. Good nightmares and stay scared.